Hello, today we are going to speak about cost-based pricing. This is very common methodology, as you know, and we are going to understand what cost to use, how to use it, what margin to use, and how can we apply it with their advantages and disadvantages. Accountants have developed many different cost concepts that are very useful in many situations, from fully allocated, partially, marginal costs, fixed, variable, direct, and indirect, all then again very useful. In pricing, we are going to speak about mainly about what is called incremental cost and sometimes also what is called avoided or avoidable cost. We can calculate the incremental costs as the difference between the total cost a company would experience if it makes a commitment, a sale specifically, and the total cost it experiences if it doesn't. In that sense, if you are not going to sell something, you are not going to do that particular activity, or so you are not going to spend that money. It's very clear that all variable costs are always incremental in that sense. But not only variable costs are incremental costs. Sometimes fixed costs and even semi-variable costs could be considered incremental or non-incremental. As a complementary concept, and sometimes to identify what is incremental and what is not incremental, we can define avoidable costs, that are those that either have not yet been incurred or can be reversed. The problem of this idea of avoidable cost that makes us identify what is incremental or what is not incremental, and it depends on the time perspective. At the beginning of a project, if you are going to invest something in order to produce or provide a particular service, you can consider that that particular fixed cost or semi-variable cost is also incremental. Think about research and development projects that makes necessary to invest in many fixed assets. In that sense, after doing that, in the next sales, you are not going to consider that as avoidable because there are some costs that you have already done. But this is not a good idea. Imagine, for example, in the new vaccines in COVID-19, all the research and development that pharmaceuticals are performing with the trials and all these kind of things. Do you think that it's logical not to consider that very big and huge amount of investment? I don't think so. So sometimes the solution is to use several scenarios, understanding about what is avoidable, what is not avoidable, what is incremental, what is not incremental, and fix what is the bottom line, what is the maximum possibility of the cost we can consider, and then with prudent ideas and strategic vision set, this is my point of perspective, so we are going to consider that cost as incremental or as avoidable or not avoidable. In cost plus margin methodology, we need to define what costs and what margin. We have already spoken about the costs we should use. Okay, no, it's not perfectly clear, but it's good enough doing several scenarios. What about the margin? We can define a lot of different margins. The problem is when you are speaking about a margin, you must define what is the criteria to calculate it. For example, we can define contribution margin or total margin. We can do this calculation over the price or over the costs. In that sense, the margin defined over the price is completely different than the margin defined over the costs, like here. In that sense, you can deduce, defining the margin like this, what is the price regarding to that margin, doing that very simple algebra. Similarly, in all the other possibilities. The previous margin definitions were related to unitary measures. It's very common to use profit over sales. And if you make these calculations that are quite simple, you are going to conclude that really is exactly the same the contribution margin over the price. So when you are using profit over sales, really you are using exactly the same than the unitary criteria to calculate what is called the contribution margin. Previously, we have defined several types of margins. Again, whatever margin you would like to use to calculate the price using that formulas. The thing is, what number we should put inside that M margin. We can use the traditional margin because we have used this margin always in our company, and it's good enough for us. The problem with that is in that margin or traditional margin, you are not capturing the changes in the market and you are not capturing the new perceptions of the customer. Also, you can use the market margin and you can copy the margin of your competitors from your competitors. In that sense, you are assuming you are exactly the same than your competitors related or regarding to differentiation. With only this margin and cost, you are calculating the price to get a particular profit. Regarding to cost and cost-based methodologies, it's very common to use also the idea of the break-even point. That is the volume at which the total contribution equals fixed cost. This is pretty simple calculation. Why is useful this? It's useful because sometimes, because of the time perspective we have spoken about, we can decide to use this break-even point to decide, okay, we are going to consider today what is an incremental cost, but with the perspective of the next 3 years, because in 3 years we are going to reach that break-even point. This is a prudent criteria. Regarding to costs and margins, specifically to contribution margin, some managers can use what is called volume hurdles. What is a volume hurdle? A volume hurdle, given a percentage of contribution margin today or at this moment, you are considering an increase or decrease in prices. So what is the increase or decrease in sales needed to offset that given increase or decrease in price? In that sense, if you decrease the price, you are going to experience an increase in volume. But of course, to be better off after this movement, the increase in volume should be over the particular or given volume hurdle. Let's think the other way around. If you increase the price, you are going to experience a decrease in volume. And that decrease in volume, the volume hurdle, is the maximum decrease in volume you need to experience in order to be better off after making that movement. There are some exercises to make this more understandable. Thank you for attending this short class about cost plus margin.